Hello, Terry.
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Yeah, fine, thanks.
Good. Good. I'm so glad you could make it
No
to share
problem.
with us. Yeah, this will be a good meeting. We'll just wait a few more minutes for others to join and we'll get started.
Hello.
Hey, Fatih. How are you doing?
Hi, Melissa. I'm good. Like last couple of weeks, we have been talking about the weather.
Oh, yeah.
It's like amazing. Like I think summer arrived to Sweden finally. But I remember seeing snow mid-June here, so it's still up for, we'll see.
Yeah, it's starting to get nice here too. It still gets pretty chilly at night, but I mean, nothing compared to where you are, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Hello. I think we're just waiting for a couple more. I believe Kara was going to join us today as well. Hello, Kara.
Hi, Melissa. Hi, everyone.
Okay, well, we had a couple of items on our agenda. I guess we can go ahead and get started with those. And then I'm hoping we can just jump into suggestions and guidance from Terry as far as what to do with our documentation now. I think we still have some work to do as far as getting those PRs finalized and put in. We can do that, but we can still benefit from advice from best practices on how to present this in the future. I'm going to go ahead and share the notes. All right, so do we want to take a few minutes and just see what the latest status is on these PRs? It gives Terry a chance to see what we have as well.
And I also have PR, not PR, action item on me to reach out to people. I actually pinged Matthias and Eric because they had some comments pending on those PRs, and they both went back and I think they said they are fine with how it is now, and we can work on them incrementally once they get merged. And I also pinged Anne-Marie. I remember seeing message from Justin you on Slack as well, but I haven't got any response from Anne-Marie about what she thinks us merging those PRs. So that's where we stand.
The last time we talked, Anne-Marie was like super swamped with some stuff going on in her company.
Yeah.
Yeah, we all know what that feels like. So, I mean, we can take some time. There's no need to rush it out there. And we'll figure out what to do.
We can also always just merge it.
Yeah. So these are the pull requests we were looking at. And I don't know if Terry, if you wanted to grab these links from here. I have the links in the notes, but I can share them in chat as well. That'd probably be easier, just so you have something to look at while we're chatting. We do have one other announcement I want to get to. For Kara, we are going to be opening up nominations for co-chair. She's been with us for 2 years and is ready to pass the torch to another person for co-chair. Kara, do you want to talk to us a little bit? Make us feel better about your leaving us?
Well,
At least in
I'll
that
still,
position, you're not really leaving us.
yeah, I'll still be here. I'll still be joining, but after 2 years, it's a good time to make space for someone else. I have loved being co-chair of the Interoperability SIG, so it's a highly recommended endeavor. And I would say that I think Melissa already is showing how fantastic it is to have, you know, a little bit of churn and have new people come in and bring their enthusiasm and energy. So, you know, we're hoping to have another fabulous co-chair step up, and nominations are open. And we'll send an email out about this, and you will be able to reply on that email thread nominating whoever you would like. And depending on the number of nominations, we may then run an election in a few weeks.
Awesome. Thank you, Kara. Excited to see, you know, what will happen next. Also very glad that, Kara, you're not leaving us entirely. We still expect to see your smiling face. So
Ever.
this will be good. Okay, let's move back to these pull requests. Terry, we had 2 of these. We have one of, you know, describing pipeline steps that we were talking about. Another describing pipeline stage terminology, and there's been a ton of work on these items. And it's about time to start moving these forward and getting them into a presentable format for the community. So we were wondering, given your, you know, what you discuss in best practices and stuff, if you have some advice for this type of documentation.
So let me give you a feel for what we are building at the moment, and then we'll see how we can best align those. So what we've been doing is creating an overview of the whole continuous delivery process, and then trying to structure that so that people from different backgrounds and different audiences can get up to speed with the whole picture of what's involved in managing continuous delivery. So we're building a website which will have multiple resources in it. There's an overarching narrative that explains, you know, why we do what we do, and then drives down into different learning steps for, you know, what's important in each area. But then we have also designed the site so that it incorporates, if you like, worked examples using different types of tooling. So there's an area of the site which is already set aside for the various CDF projects to introduce using their tools to achieve the continuous delivery goals. So we've got the opportunity here to both expand on standards as part of the narrative, so we can call out the importance of interoperability between tooling as part of the explanatory narrative, but we can also, if you like, host deep dives into the detail of what you've produced here. So we could incorporate that into the site itself, or we could share our learning about, you know, constructing the site itself and you know, show you how to create your own version of something that you can run independently and we can link out to if necessary.
Okay. Fatih and Justin, I'm going to lean on you too. How would you best describe what we have so far? I'm imagining, you know, some of it is like just a list, kind of a grab bag to make people aware of what the possibilities are. That's always helpful, especially as far as, you know, the pipeline steps and things like that, to consider what other people are doing and maybe implement something they hadn't thought of before. I'm not sure, like, where exactly would that align with what best practices is doing with the website?
Yeah, may I share my screen, because this
Yes.
document, like I think the document the PRs are sent for has been around since the beginning of the SIG interoperability. And let me see if I am sharing. So you can see this establishing shared vocabulary thing, yeah.
Yes,
So
we can see.
just going back to what you said, Terry, like technology aspects, like, okay, people are working on embracing continuous delivery, and they need some technologies to, use to establish pipelines for those things. And they are after making technology selections. And those things may become difficult because the terms used by different technologies differ from each other, or what people call them differ from each other. And that was kind of the first thing we did in our SIG 2 years ago. And we started documenting what all these different technologies call certain things. Like one tool could be calling workflow, the other one is calling the same thing pipeline. So now I am taking a bit more broader look. So this may be a useful thing. It is not a best practice per se, but it could help people to get started with, learning about the technology space. So this could be a candidate to publish as part of best practice websites, link from some best practices. Oh, by the way, if you are looking at technology stuff, this document may be a good thing as an input to your journey. And because these things are also talking about stages and steps and so on. And then the open PRs, stages and steps could be, okay, you made your selection. You are using tool X and tool Y. Look, here is what others are doing. These are the type of stages they have for building stuff, for running static analysis, or security type of stuff, or deployment. So you can get some idea from this type of input. And the other thing I want to highlight is like, okay, the 2 PRs are there. This document has been there looking at technology aspects. I want to highlight the discussion Justin started in February. This is, again, another input. It could be considered as another input for organizations or people on their way to embrace continuous delivery. Okay, now you learned about stages and steps, but what else people are running as part of their pipelines? And here you can see we have some conversation here about what different organizations are using. And maybe, like, again, as you said, Terry, these may not be considered as best practices, but these could be considered as practices employed by different organizations that may be under certain best practices you are promoting on your website. And the question is like how to make these things visible and easily accessible. Because some people find this document, the vocabulary document, or the conversation, the discussion, or the PRs by chance or by pointing to each other, but making them easily, findable and consumable is another thing, which is, I think, the conversation we are having here.
So what we've been doing quite a lot of is thinking about the audience for the information. And there are multiple very different audiences that we need to connect with in order to get the message across. So, for example, there are a large number of organizations that have heard of continuous delivery or DevOps or various practices associated with continuous delivery, but they've not got a clear idea of what it actually is and how to do it. So as a result, there's lots of people doing things that they think are continuous delivery, which clearly aren't. So we have to have one track through this documentation that allows people to come in and get a really firm grounding in, what are the key points here? What do I need to understand about the concepts? What do I need to learn to really understand the challenges that I'm going to be facing in adopting this? And so that's a fairly non-technical audience in many cases, because you're addressing the C-suite and the leadership who are making decisions about selecting tools. But at the same time, you need to teach them a certain amount of the important technical concepts to make sure that they're making decisions based on the right metrics. So I think there's one cut here where it would be beneficial to introduce some of these things to that audience, so that people are getting, you know, a good baseline understanding of what some of the key concepts are and what we call them and what that means from a tooling perspective. And that would certainly, as you say, help with the tool selection process. Then obviously we've got a lot of people here already who are doing this stuff every day and are very mature and are not interested in a discussion about best practices because they already do it better than anybody else anyway. But they are interested in the detail of, you know, different approaches to solving particular technical challenges. So having deeper dives into specific areas are still of value to that audience, and they can be very technical. So there's a second audience in that space. But then there's also a third very important audience, which is, you know, the people who are building the tools in the first place. So, you know, that's not just our project teams, but other tool vendors and the, you know, cloud providers who are utilizing that tooling to provide their products to customers. And obviously it's very important to get those people involved in this discussion, because that's the path that we need to take to standardize some of this and, you know, not just improve interoperability, but improve the communication around the concepts that we're using. So that's the audience that we're probably weakest on in the content that we have right now. But we can certainly use the same approach that we've been using to facilitate more conversations happening at the tool provider level. And again, I think that would be useful to use the same site as a place to publish this information, so that, you know, we're connecting the ideas of best practice in the methodology and tooling that implements best practice, and therefore a list of vendors that can provide you with best practice tooling that will give you what you want. So I think there is a continuity here, but it might not always be the same document that you need for the different audiences. So it might be worth having a think about how you want to present some of these concepts to a slightly different audience to the one you've maybe had in mind up to date.
Okay, that makes sense. And I think, would you say we focused mainly on like users, implementers of these tools and in the documentation that we have right now?
Well, I would have to go through and read it to get a feel for the language, but from what you've shown me today, it feels that that's addressing the low level concepts at a fairly technical level. And so there's a lot of presupposed knowledge that's embedded. And so that's great, because you've got the piece that addresses that audience. But there might be a need for some reframing in a separate document to present the same information in a more easily accessible way to a slightly different audience.
Okay.
The things that we're working on is also having case studies around pipeline shapes. I can't remember if that action item of mine is from this SIG or from best practices SIG, but one of the things that I'm on the hook for is documenting what eBay's pipelines look like today and where we're headed, using the terminology from this vocabulary list.
Yeah, so certainly we're putting case studies in the best practices view. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to do an overarching technology agnostic view of continuous delivery, and then a section where here's a bunch of potential tools that you could be using, and here's how you would approach the problem using each of those tools. And then we're also looking at, and here are some, people who are already doing this stuff, and here's how they're using the tooling to do what they do. So I certainly think there would be a benefit to joining these streams up, so that we're publishing the information and connecting it where it's most likely to be seen.
Okay. Do you currently have like a plan right now that you've been working on, outline of the website, or do you have a, POC or something that
So
those of us here could take a look at?
you'll find in the CDF repositories, there's one which is best practices site, and so that's the content of the website.
Okay.
We've got one big outstanding PR that we need to get in shortly, which is the structure of the majority of the information. Once that's in, it will then become clearer where to hang the other bits off around the outside of that. So I would say within a few weeks we should be in a position to start accepting contributions from outside the core team, so we can begin to add additional information.
Okay. How about we have an action item for one or more of us to go check that out, and just, get an overview of what is existing right there already, and see if, where we could possibly fit our information in, so that we're ready to submit that or to give that suggestion.
And to give you a feel for what's there, we're using Doxy to create all of the content. So it's just a Hugo based generated website, and in fact you can just pull the site and create your own local copy of it, and just modify and submit PRs.
Awesome. Okay, I'm just going to share this just for those that might be watching this video later. This is what it looks like right now. I believe Fatih put this link in the chat. Is this?
Yeah, Terry, please add the right link. This is the one I found on the PR as deploy preview link.
Yeah, so this is the very early cut, so there's not much content in there, but you can probably drill into the learn section, and if you look at the early sections, you should find content in those. You may recognize that image.
Awesome. Yeah, this makes a lot of sense. I think we can definitely contribute more details, and like you said, we probably need to work on different levels for different audience.
Yeah, and then the learn section is where all of the sort of technology agnostic stuff will go. And then we've also got the community and resources sections, which are the areas where we'll be sharing case studies and drilling into different perspectives on implementation. So we should be able to add the interoperability stuff into probably both community and resources in different aspects.
yeah, this seems like a good place to start. All right, great. Oh, I'm excited. This will be cool. I was curious too, like if this stuff was just going to live in our GitHub repo forever, and we just point to it, or how to make it more, you know, nice for folks to come in and read and absorb. So this is a
I
really
think
good.
certainly I found that, for example, with the MLOps stuff, some people are not comfortable with the idea of a document being in a Git repository, and so discoverability is not brilliant, and it affects the way that people read the information. So yes, it will definitely help to have a CDF top level domain that's dedicated to best practices, and then build the marketing piece that goes around that, so that we're promoting and sharing, distributing the information.
Awesome.
And then the idea is that once that central facility of information is available, it makes it much easier for individual projects to then link into that and say, here's what our project delivers as part of this overview, and here's what best practice is when using our tool to solve this problem.
Awesome. This is really promising.
I have a question, actually, if I may. Now, everyone is talking about software supply chain and all those things, and there's a project called Salsa. I'm sure you all heard about it, and it talks about best practice, and they determined some levels. I think they have 4 levels as part of their spec, or whatever they call it. Like, Terry, do you, I don't know, if it makes sense to have such approach for CD best practices as well. I'm not saying like maturity levels or whatever, but just because they are doing it for software supply chain, maybe for CD. Yeah.
So I didn't quite understand the question there.
Yeah. May I share my screen so I can show what I am talking about? So this, you can see Salsa website, yeah?
Yes.
And they talk about certain best practices, and based on those best practices, they have like different levels. Okay, if you are following these best practices, if you have these things in your supply chain, you are level 1, level 2. I'm not actually after at this point in time having levels, but could there be some kind of place on the best practice, say, let's benchmark yourself. Are you doing these things? Okay, then you are doing CI or CD or whatever.
So in fact, Justin has already encouraged us to put a maturity assessment into the site. So that is something that's already in the works. Yes.
Okay, then yeah.
And would that
and software supply chain itself is part of the best practice discussion, and that's one of the areas where we've got a lot of work left to do to fill that out to an appropriate standard.
Yeah, my question was like CD type of level of CD adherence, compliance, or adoption, or whatever type of thing, not just software supply chain, or not.
Yeah. So from a continuous delivery perspective, there's a maturity assessment planned.
And Terry, how much is that building off of the DORA metrics?
So obviously the DORA metrics are a key part of what we're discussing, but to even get to the DORA metrics, you've already got to be at level 4 of maturity. So there's a lot of basic concept understanding, and structuring of your organization that you need to get right before you can even start to benefit from some of the detail. And that's been part of the, the more challenging exercise is that, we've had a group of very technical people contributing the detail of, how to optimize a specific type of pipeline. But there's a big gap in what is this continuous delivery thing and why are we doing it in the first place? So we've had to do a fair amount of work to fill in the business concepts and the drivers and constraints around, well, this is of benefit to you if you are this type of organization pursuing this type of product commercialization. But we also have to flag, if you're this type of organization following this type of, strategic planning methodology, then you really shouldn't be trying to implement continuous delivery because it's going to hurt you rather than benefit you. So it's getting that understanding of, this is designed and optimized for solving a particular type of problem. And here's how you identify whether your organization is a good fit for using this approach.
Yeah, that's really valuable to take more of a high level and in some ways introductory, but a really, really high level of the sort of terrain, the space. Yeah, okay, so what we're really coming in with is much more detailed and technical steps and stages. Okay, that's really interesting. Just to recap our previous conversation, you are, for the moment right now, with what you have for best practices site, you're imagining that the steps and stages work and maybe the vocabulary work as well would fit better when in the section which is more on best, like specific use cases and more providing context and explanation for what those specific more technical use cases are addressing and how they're doing so.
I think there's an opportunity to fit this in multiple places.
Okay.
So the key is to think about this, back at the audience level again. Who do you want to address with this information, and how do you want to present it to them so that they will easily be able to grasp the implications for themselves? And that's never one document. You always have to provide a different view for each viewpoint. So, if you're talking to, a CTO, then you're going to want to communicate some basic understanding of what the key concepts are in a pipeline and what those things are called in different products, and communicate the benefits of having standardization and what that gives you in terms of efficiencies. But that's like a paragraph. Whereas if what you're doing is trying to work with, technical leads or architects, teaching them how to be able to differentiate different tooling based on the nuances of, the function of that tooling at a particular level, then, that's a small book. And so it's a case of finding each of these audiences, providing the content that will speak to that audience, and then linking that in the place within the site where it's most likely to be discovered by that audience.
Yeah, makes sense.
And one of the things that we're doing a lot of is trying to think about the journey through this site for different people, and how do we direct them so they get the key concepts that they need first before we bury them in so much detail that it becomes scary.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So so I think you could probably link what you've got in say the resources section, just because what you've got is a set of reference documents effectively, and so you could present the detail you've already got as technical references in that resources section, and that would be fine because it'd be published and people could access it and you could link to it in your communications. But at the same time, you probably want to have a good think about how do we now build an audience perspective on this information, and what other content should we generate to link people into this model of looking at the world and understanding the problems that exist in that space.
These are really good notes. I'm trying to capture everything to put it in our notes so we remember. It's a little bit overwhelming because there's a lot of work that we can do, but I like the step one approach. Just get our stuff linked in resources, and then next step, think about where we want to go from there, where we can change the content a little bit to match the audience we want. I like it.
Yeah,
like
and
gently
some
pulling,
of it's about
gently pulling. Sorry to interrupt. Gently pulling people into more details. Like, oh, if you are reading this, it means you are after this type of stuff, and this is because of this, and then they can slowly get into that mindset. Okay, now I am going into details. So yeah, instead of just suddenly getting hit by tons of details.
Yeah. So one of the things that you often need is the narrative that led you to work on this problem in the first place. So it's, what's the conversation that you've been having over the past couple of years that has led to all of this work being codified? So it's putting that explanation in a way that you're communicating with someone, saying, look, this is a problem that exists and this is how it might affect you, and this is how we have tried to draw out this information into a way that you can build from it and understand it. And then that narrative can be targeted to the different audiences. So you can do a lightweight version of that for decision makers, and then you can do a much more in-depth narrative for the people who are building tools. And then both of those things link into the detail.
And do you think,
sorry,
go on.
No, carry on.
I do, linking back to Fatih's bringing up the maturity model, do you think that using a maturity model is helpful for signposting that at all these different levels of discussion and allowing people to sort of come to a common understanding? We're at this level, this is what we're struggling with, here's how we're looking to improve, here are our best practice suggestions.
I think the reality is that if you talk to any organization, they will firmly tell you that they have a world-class continuous delivery solution, even if they're not doing continuous delivery at all. Because that's the world we live in. Yeah. So the maturity model piece has to be a very gentle mirror that you hold up to people to allow them to dispassionately see what they're actually doing versus what represents best practice in that particular area. And it's hard. It's not easy to do that without deeply offending people, but at the same time, you can't help people unless you can show them where the blind spots are and what they need to do to cover those off. Absolutely. I'm sure you're familiar with the research. I think it came out of the latest DORA report that people vastly overestimate the efficacy or the capabilities, the reliability of their CI/CD systems. And this is more so for people who are farther away from the implementation or the use of it. So when you move down to the more technical teams, that they have a more accurate sense of actually where they're at with their CI/CD systems.
So it's really good actually that you've approached the best practices, looking at it more from those who are perhaps farther away or new to it. So that's really useful. And one of those ways I think of explaining, like, oh, here's where we're at, and maybe it's not as good as we think, is actually using something like the DORA metrics. So yeah, hopefully.
I think that like part of the DORA metrics come with a set of capabilities. I think there's like 17 of them. And those are super critical. They're not all created equal. Some of them have a fair amount of depth where you might have feature flagging. I think that's one of the capabilities. You might have feature flagging that's like, I checked in a config and that's my feature flag. Or you might have a launch darkly type thing. And those are two very different levels of maturity within that capability. And it would be easier to start with the config type thing in order to play with feature flags than it is to do like a vendor evaluation-y sort of thing. Like the thing I often tell people at eBay is the whole point of this like framework of evaluation is you shouldn't spend time doing chaos testing if you don't have unit tests. Like you have to, we're not there yet. It's an awesome tool, but you got to get the basics done first. And so I like identifying what the basics are and saying like, like chaos testing is more in line with trunk-based development feature flagging type world than it is I write my code and have a linter and use unit tests. And so grouping like functionality together around where people are helps them figure out like where they need to be to get to the next level.
So one of the most controversial things in our best practices information pack is the assertion that continuous delivery is not a technical methodology. It's a business methodology. And that if your business is not committed to that style of product commercialization, you cannot successfully implement continuous delivery by trying to do it by stealth in your technology department, because the business will sabotage you on all of the key things that you need in order to get those metrics working. So part of the challenge is that you can implement measurement of all of the DORA metrics and do everything at a technical level within your delivery team and still completely fail and potentially take out the business, because you need all the commercial structure of the organization to be working at the same cadence and operating at the same pace and signing off on things at the same rate, or you will just not be able to improve those metrics. And that's actually the biggest challenge for most people trying to improve in this space. It's not that they don't understand what they have to do at a technical level. It's that they don't have the business buy-in to restructure the organization to allow them to succeed.
One last question. This is terminology question. I like working with terminology. Like some people don't like the term maturity level. Like I don't know. Again, it's not about like us using it, but like when you go out with like maturity level, I don't know what would be the reaction for such people with strong opinions. Maturity is not really the way we talk about these things. Like how, I don't know, just because I had that kind of conversations when I called something maturity level because I didn't know any other word to use instead of maturity. They said, no, maturity, we don't talk about maturity stuff.
I think there's a sense that historically maturity models have been used to say, once you reach the end level, like you're done, you're there, you've succeeded, you're all good. And one of the things I really like about the door metrics is that they really emphasize that this is a continual process. You are never done. You can always improve. So I think bringing that in, even if we did have some sort of framework of levels, but bringing that in and making it really clear that we don't think level 4 or whatnot is the final level, and then you're done. You can walk away and do something else.
Yeah.
Kind of call
But
our
I think this is
piece experimentation culture, which is like at the point where you're at the end, you're trying stuff out and seeing what happens, and like it's a much more playful world than adhere to the spec, do the steps kind of world.
Right. Is it right to say too that someone at a higher level or a further along maturity level that they can be rated better than someone at an earlier level? Because it might be more, so some of these cases might be just more about priority, like what is necessary for that particular system. You know, maybe it's not necessary for an organization to be at the highest maturity level, that's not the best way for them to focus their energies. What do you
yeah.
think?
So
about that?
I think it's probably a mistake to flag maturity levels as a measure of achievement. It's much better to keep this in terms of a model of effectiveness. So what people really want to understand is how close they are to, you know, the theoretical maximum pace they could ever go at. So you're not offending people if you allow them to see where they sit compared to others doing the same thing. But if you put a lot of value judgments around, you know, how good they are as an organization, then yes, you're going to put a lot of backs up as a result of doing that. It's not helpful. So that's why a key piece of what we're doing is trying to elicit part of the audience up front by saying, you really shouldn't be reading this. It'll be harmful to your health. Go and work on something else. Because, you know, this model of efficiency is not something that applies to every organization. You know, you can only achieve the real high end Metrics if you're a company that is doing product discovery in that West Coast US model of, you know, we're going to go to market with an idea, we're going to test that idea in the market very fast and iteratively. As soon as we get product market fit, we're going to scale that up massively, and that's how we create products. DevOps came from that world. Continuous delivery is you know, really encoding that process. But if you're a European bank where all your strategic decisions are made on an annual cadence, and everybody's bonuses are linked to deliveries on that strategic plan, then you will be harmed if you try and bring in continuous delivery as a methodology underneath all of that, because you're going to create a big fight between the technical teams and the leadership teams. So you need to first get buy-in to restructure the way the organization works, to get it making decisions at a cadence that can approach what's possible with a good continuous delivery system. And then it's safe to actually do the work to implement that. So then you're not trying to judge people with a maturity assessment by saying, you know, these people are very slow because they have a strategic roadmap that's very slow. You just say, well, those people don't belong in this assessment. And the assessment is how fast you can iterate on your product ideas.
is a really good conversation.
Yeah.
I love it. It's bringing back memories of
Yeah.
things that have
It's good
happened.
that meeting is recorded, so we can go back
Yeah,
and watch
I'm going to go
again.
back and watch it for sure. I'm going to clip some parts and distribute them to specific individuals and groups. Very valuable stuff.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well,
Okay,
hopefully we will
before,
soon have all this available. So, you know, we can just point people at the site and say, go read that.
yes, read the manual. I like it. Okay, before we run out of time, let's figure out what we want to do next. I think we know we definitely want to submit material. And it looked like you had some contribution guidelines, so maybe we can follow that with getting our stuff linked into your system. Now, we want it in a better format, not just in the GitHub repo, right? So we need to do that. And then
Yeah, so you can leave it in markdown format, and you know, we just need to decide how you want to treat the, if you like, the publication of what you have. So you probably want to keep your own repo for maintaining what you're doing, but then you want to be able to periodically update your sections of our repo with a specific published piece of content.
okay, that makes sense.
So Terry, you said you will have the first initial version of the web page ready in coming weeks. So like if we say 1 month, then we can perhaps work towards that target, figuring out how we want to present this as well, like linking.
Yeah, so
yeah.
Where we are at the moment, we don't have a fixed publication date right now, but we do have a big chunk of the content already written. And what we're doing is migrating that content into the website. So the bulk update is a big PR that's outstanding at the moment that fills out most of the technical sections of the learning piece with a first draft of the overarching content picture, and then we'll do lots of iterative improvement on that. But what we'll do is we'll get to a level of maturity with the content where we'll say, okay, this is good for publication, and then we'll go live with that view of it, but then we'll just continue maintaining it and iterating to gradually improve it over time. So the aim is to try and get that publication out this year, and you know, hopefully within a matter of months. But from your perspective, if you're interested in seeing the content of the site, the bulk of the information is currently sitting in a PR rather than in main. So that's a piece of work that I need to get finalized this month. We've just got some debates over terminology that we need to clean up, and then you know what that's like. So you can obviously see the site because it's in an open repository. Please don't link to it externally at the moment because it's the working folder. It won't be the published view. We'll be sticking that up on one of the Doxy servers that we've already got in place. So we can publish like that. If you submit PRs, and you're welcome to start doing that at any point, you'll find that you will get a preview environment generated, so you can actually see your environment in your PR. It's easy for us to go through and do reviews on submissions and things because it's all the site stands alone on each PR.
And Terry, the link that Fatih put in the chat here, that is the preview for the major PR that you refer to, is that correct?
Let me just check what that link was. That I think is the is the view of main, if I remember correctly. Let me open it up here. Hang on.
And the PR we are referring here is like PR number 4, yeah? Because I see lots of conversation on the PR.
Yeah, I can't remember what the link terminology is for this, so I'm just going to go and look at that. Oh no, I think that is the current PR actually in that link, looking at the content. So yeah, so you'll be able to see most of the content from that link, but it will probably go away once the PR is submitted, and then you'll need to go back to the main site.
Okay. All right. Anyone want to volunteer to just try it out, see what it looks like? I don't know if anyone has time this next week. I know, or the next couple of weeks, I guess, before our next meeting, maybe we can just show a little preview of what it might look like.
So has anyone used Doxy or Hugo for documentation before?
Used Hugo, yes.
Yeah, so Doxy is just Hugo with an extra library for some additional features.
Cool.
So you'll find that you can actually just pull a Docker image and instantiate it in Docker, or you can create a local copy and work on that. But it's very vanilla Hugo documentation, so be pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I can, Melissa, you can action me for about this interoperability story part, so we can at least start crafting that paragraph that could take people into more detailed thing via references link. So at least we can also learn Hugo or Doxy, how it works via that PR.
Right.
So I can take that part, but then the stage step stuff or quality gates, that is not technology per se, but it's more like how others are doing this stuff. Maybe that someone else could try that part, how to fit that into the current structure of the page. Then yeah, Terry, and sorry to interrupt, Tara can guide us how we can split the information based on the audience on a live PR.
Yeah, and you can always ping me on Slack. So
did we say that we would put roughly what's in what we have for steps and stages in sort of a reference section, sort of have it completely in one place, and then in other areas maybe link in, give a little introductory link in, and people can deep dive as they would like. Is that a good starter workflow, or did you want more of a specific breaking up of the information depending on the audience throughout the site?
I don't have any objection to you providing technical reference documentation in the references section. So if what you've got is a brain dump of lots of detail, then that's the ideal place to put that. But you may find that you need to explain some of it to different audiences, and therefore you want to create additional content.
Okay, I can do the reference doc, just taking what we have in the steps and stages. Do we, in the interoperability SIG, feel we are done with the information that's there, or we're happy working forward? Was there any more review on those PRs that we wanted to do?
I think two outstanding comments were, like the two people with outstanding comments were Matthias and Eric, and they both say, yeah, these versions can go in and then we can work on them once they are in. I think, Justin, you were fine with the latest steps PR. maybe you can
Yep.
approve the stage PR as well. I think one of them didn't have approval or something. And then like we can try Anne-Marie again and at least give her a heads up. We are going to merge these things one last time. She may be busy. And then, yeah, then the rest is like we continue improving or splitting the document, because now it is kind of mixed between technology and the other stuff. So we can split it while we work with best practices, but that's a good opportunity to split the document as well or reorganize.
Okay, so I can take that action item and just start a PR and we can work forward from there. In the reference section.
I have a document that I sent you for review, which was I have an action item to like document intent-based pipelines.
Oh, blog
Yes.
post. It wasn't a
Yes.
blog post. Yeah.
I put that, yeah, I put that right away as an action item at the top because I just got back from DevNexus and was
Yeah, no worries.
exhausted. So I think I read it in the middle of the night and I'm like, I need to check this later. But yeah, I put both of us wrap up intent-driven pipeline thoughts for an article, get that ready. And then I had the action item too to come up with one for like just basic CI, right? An example YAML, ideal YAML file, and that I would love to have in my dreams. Yeah, it's a good start. We can definitely add to it and get that out. How do we go about that, Cara? We should probably need to be more thoughtful with your time. We're a couple minutes past, but maybe I'll reach out to you and find out like how we progress in getting an article published and stuff like that with the CD.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We'd be thrilled to publish it. So that's
Cool.
Should be a very smooth process.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for your time. Please update if I missed something or whatever in our agenda and notes. I think I got all the action items in there. I'm just adding one for you, Cara, for getting the initial links in there. Thank you so much, Terry, for your input. That was an awesome conversation. Led us off on a couple of other paths too, which were great to talk about. So yeah, this was awesome.
Well,
Looking forward
absolutely
to
my
next time.
pleasure.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Have a nice day.
Bye.